I affectionately and often call you my soil expert. You're kind of my go-to about soil. And of course, that's top of mind right now. There's the new Senate report that came out that we are looking at some recommendations about soil. But I think we still have a misconception about what soil health is.
Well, I think soil health it's a complicated issue. Not many people have really dived into what really the definition of a healthy soil really is. And that's because most soils aren't homogeneous. You've got different types of soils in all sorts of different locations. So in my mind, soil health really revolves around how soil functions. And function of soil is really a lot about what types of biology you have, microbes and things like that going on in the soil, both background and then how they work with plants and how they work with fertilizers and cycle nutrients and all of that stuff. So in my mind, soil health has more to do with, so chemistry does matter a little bit, but it's biology that really controls the chemistry. And when you really look at conventional agriculture, we've just discounted everything that biology is doing except for like pathogens. If you think about it, for example, like 98% of all fungi are beneficial, or kind of inert, so to speak. 2% are pathogens. And we spend all of our effort non-selectively killing all fungi when it's only 2% that we're really are economically destructive. So I think just understanding that kind of stuff is really important in my mind to improving soil health and just being smarter about the way that we manage our soils.
Where did we go wrong? Like what happened there?
I think it's easy. It's the path of least resistance, right? When you talk about chemicals coming on, nutrients or whatever it is, urea or anhydrous or any kind of chemistry that you're putting onto your crops, it makes things easy, and people like easy. And unfortunately, in some cases, you don't necessarily understand the long-term impacts of easy.
And so there's some things that you can do to better your soil. Where are we starting?
I think that the residue management, proper management of crop residues, is something that we can really do to help in returning some of the nutrients to our soil and building some of that organic matter back, and really just creating a much more forward-thinking type of soil management plan. Yeah. And you can't just take. Hence the advent of chemical fertility and whatnot. But there's a lot of value in managing crop residues. For example, with fungi. Fungi will rapidly, or more rapidly than bacteria anyway, return organic matter back to your soil, and they don't do it by sucking out nitrogen, right? Bacteria will actually take nitrogen out of the system to process carbon, where fungi don't. So understanding that is important. The problem with fungi is we kill them with tillage, and we kill them with fungicides. So most ag soils are actually very, very devoid of beneficial fungi. And the first fungi that typically come back into a system are pathogens. I think that this whole regenerative ag scene is starting to really address some of those issues. And as more farmers get into it, I think it's going to be a really good thing for the soil.
And yet, at the same time, that is more consumer driven, except for consumers, over 50% of them don't even know what it means, So
you're right. And that's why companies like McCain's have come out with these programs that, with educational programs that can teach consumers, because consumers, obviously they think that, all of their food is full of chemicals and whatnot. So it's really just an education, a public education exercise.
Of course.
But you have to do it, right? Yeah. It's not a simple thing to do, especially with potato farming, because potato farming is intensive farming. So using cover crops and trying to use less chemicals and all of those things, it's all the right things to do. So things that you can do to, moderate the impacts by expanding rotations, right? Managing crop residues, more cover cropping, just trying to use less salt-based chemicals, fertilizers, and, again, just thinking more intelligently about how to be better stewards of the land. Again, it's not always about the path of least resistance. I think that's what got us into this kind of call it mess. I mean, and I think you're right. It's consumer driven. Big companies are starting to care about what consumers think, and consumers are, they put their money where they think they have the best value, and values include moral values, right? So not just money value, it's moral value and ethics and stuff. So that's kind of my stance on that.
Okay, so at this point, so I know my soil is bad. There's steps that I take to help it, but obviously it's not an overnight process.
No.
How long does it take to rebuild soil?
Well, forever. I mean, look, I think that, it's a constant battle. So I think that as long as you understand that and you're doing things to mitigate the damage, we'll never rebuild soil in agriculture. So regenerative agriculture is kind of it's a hard term to grasp,
right?
Because to truly regenerate, you really need to not touch it. So what I think we're trying to do is mitigate some of that damage and just, increase the longevity of the soils and the organic matter, and just being more cognizant of that stuff, I think is really what regenerative agriculture is all about. And, again, cover cropping, keeping your soil covered, reducing fertility, those kinds of things are really important. And it all comes down to also like runoff into lakes and eutrophication. And, farmers get a really bad rap for putting too much fertilizer down that's running into lakes and causing algal blooms and all that stuff. So, I think, again, we just have to be more cognizant of it. And again, kudos to McCain's for kind of leading the way and having a farm that really kind of demonstrates that it can be done, and it can be done at scale. Right?
Yeah.
The big thing is like, look, man, a 30,000 acre farm can't graze cattle. Right. Yeah. So like if you're thinking regenerative agriculture only incorporates animals, well, you'll never have it. It'll never happen. Yeah. Just because huge farms can't do that. So that's where you have to use microbes and understand how ecology works and how the system works, and, return crop residues into the soil, and just start, again, it's just a bit of a phase shift in the way that you think and how you can, if you understand how ecology works, because really, all farms are just little ecological systems, and there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And if you start to understand that and how to work with it, and work with it within your agronomic program, I think that that's really a good step in the right direction.
The soil health report that came out had 26 recommendations, and we've talked about that before. But one of the things we talked about how consumers are driving it, but actually now it seems like it's coming from another space as well. Government, yeah. So it's coming from government regulation as well. Is that good?
Of course it is. Listen, one of the government's job is to protect the environment. And so if they feel that that's something that they should be doing, I agree. Where I disagree with the government is, yes, regulate, but you can't just regulate with no solution. So one of the things that I just dislike the most is when people say, oh, we have this problem, but then they don't actually have any type of solution for it. Right? So, you can't just regulate down, oh, you can't use 40% of your nitrogen anymore. Okay, well, what's the solution? What's the alternative? And the government doesn't give you the alternative. Right? So hence you have people throwing manure at, the parliament in France and stuff like that, right? Because again, the government came in and they shut you down without providing alternatives or solutions. And perhaps the government's take on it as well, that's industry's problem, not ours. And again, coming back to, I'll be honest, like companies like ours, companies like McCain's, who are actually doing things to learn so that we can provide really good advice to farmers, so that they can reduce their fertility by whatever percent, 20%, 10%, 40%, and still be profitable, or if not as profitable, more profitable than they were before. Because as you start to use less inputs, you're spending less money. It might be more time and more thought, but at the end of the day, most of the people that are doing this are actually getting higher net profits.
Right. One of the things that we started this conversation about, I said, well, how did we get here? You said, it's the path of least resistance. But I think that, unfortunately, is where we're at in terms now. We've got some potential solutions. We have some top, demand being driven from the top. But it's still not quite easy.
You got to get buy-in.
Yeah.
right? You have to get buy-in, and if farmers don't buy into it, they'll fight it. So again, you have to come at it from a logical, economically viable standpoint. It's there's a lot of a learning curve involved, right? Yeah. So farmers aren't even really taught about biology in agronomy school, right? You go to agronomy school, agronomists aren't even really taught about biology. So this whole biostimulants biology market is really foreign to these guys because they're not taught it in school. And again, my perspective is I'm an ecologist by training. I went through a completely different area of university. I didn't go through agronomy. I went through ecology, and I have a master's in plant ecology, right? So just a totally different view on things. So I learned about all the stuff, and the people that took the agronomy, learned more about conventional agronomy, and conventional agronomy discounts what biology does.